Hi Morgan, thank you so much for joining me today on my channel. I think we could just start with a little introduction if you want to share who you are and what you do from a linguistic perspective.
Okay, so thank you very much for inviting me, Sarah. I'm very happy to be here. So my name is Morgan, as you mentioned. So I'm a linguist. I'm a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Zurich, and I study child language acquisition. And on the side, I also enjoy learning languages, and as a result, I'm also interested in learning more about second language acquisition in adulthood.
And okay, so I think I mispronounced your name when we started. Is it the French pronunciation? Morgan?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay. I do speak a little bit of French, so I should have managed pronouncing it correctly.
It's okay.
And okay, and your languages. And your languages. What are your languages that you speak and that you're learning?
So I'm a French native speaker. Then I learned English at school. I'm learning Persian, Dutch, and Japanese mostly, and I dabble a bit in German because of my work now in Switzerland.
Okay. Swiss German, right?
Yeah, that's a bit complicated. So because in the
German there.
office, it's kind of more
Mm-hmm.
standard German, and official documents, they're always in standard German. And I don't have that many contacts with actual Swiss people. But yeah, I'm kind of doing bit both. But that's a bit confusing.
Okay.
Swiss German is
That's
quite
what I was
different.
thinking, yeah. So you kind of have to learn both then. Is it like how the difference are the languages like intelligible? Like can you speak one language and understand the other, or are they two
They're
separate languages?
actually not intelligible. I know some
Oh.
people, like a Swiss person and a German person, they can't
Mm-hmm.
actually speak in German with each
Oh,
other. They don't
okay.
understand each other, which is so funny.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's really like two different languages. It's more than like regional
Mm.
variation. Yeah.
Just the speaking, or is it the same with writing? Are they
No, in writing it's
different
the
too?
same. In writing
The
it's the
same.
same.
Okay.
So yeah, both
At least there's
languages are the
that.
same.
Yeah.
But in speaking, it's completely different. So basically, all Swiss Germans are kind of bilingual. So that is so weird because what they speak and
Okay.
what they write is different. That's what makes it even harder when you move to Switzerland because you're like,
Mm.
okay, which one do I start? Do I want to
Mm.
understand my healthcare contract first, or do I want to talk with people first?
Yeah, I guess you really have to prioritize there with that too.
uh,
But can you use English though? I mean, they speak English in Switzerland, so you can't do like contractual things like that in English,
So
like
no,
healthcare
contracts
and
have to be.
no.
I'm lucky because I'm French, so I always manage to get
Oh,
my contracts in French because they always
mm,
can call somebody from the office from the
okay.
French-speaking part. But contracts have to be in one of the official languages. So that's kind
Official
of
languages
tricky.
are
Which are
German. Or,
so they are German, French, Italian, and Romansh.
huh?
Romansh is like
Okay.
a language. It's another Romance language which is close to French and Italian, basically.
Hmm. I guess I didn't realize that English wasn't one of those languages in so many. I know that French is like French and English, they're pretty close. Like it's usually one or the other. That is an official language, either French or English in many countries. Is it
Mm-hmm.
like that in, you might not know for like all of Europe, but is it like that in most of the countries that, I mean, in France, for instance, I'm sure it's French, but do you also have English as a language? Like, can you go and get a contract like that in English?
In France, I don't think so. No,
No.
I think yeah, I think European countries like legally each time is going to be in one of the
Hmm.
official language. Sometimes you can ask for an unofficial translation. So in Belgium,
Okay.
I was working in the Dutch-speaking part of Belgium for a while, and I couldn't speak Dutch right away. So what you get usually is that you have the contract in the original language, and you get a translation on the side. But they really say that's non-contractual translation because
Hmm.
they kind of want to be on the safe side if there's a
Yeah.
mistake. So yeah, and Swiss, they're very like that. So it's always funny. Sometimes I speak to them in English, but they have to answer to me in German. because if they make a mistake, they can really get into trouble. So even if they can understand me, by email, they will always reply me in German. And they always reply well, so they understood my original email. But that's
well, at least that's nice that you can English, or is that in English or in French that you speak to them?
In Switzerland, I take French because they have it.
Okay, in French. Okay, it's in French. Okay, so that's nice that you can, especially in your native language, that you can do that and then have that, because it's much easier to learn how to understand another language than it is to learn how to speak another language. So at least you have that sort of cushion when you're going into learning German. So what do you do over there? What do you I mean, you don't have to give your specific job or location or any of that, but what do you do as far as your linguistics and your research and your new job title?
Yes, so I'm a postdoctoral researcher, so this is kind of a position between the PhD and the professor. So I'm not yet. It's kind of like I always say, like the postdoc's a bit like Britney Spears' song, like I'm not a girl, not yet a woman. It's kind of like that from an academic perspective. So yeah, I'm not a student anymore, not yet a professor. And I study child language acquisition. So we have a pool of 15 languages, which was selected based on the fact that they are maximally typologically different. So you have isolating languages, polysynthetic languages, etc. And I'm studying which units children manage to extract from their inputs at different stages, and how the typological variation affects which types of units children can extract. Because children don't know what a word is. And so when they hear people speak, they have to learn first to cut the stream of speech that they hear into the different words, and then learn how to combine. And in isolating languages which have a fixed word order, like in English, for example, children, they extract larger units, because since the word order is usually quite fixed, you have longer sequences which are completely repeated with low variation. And so children, they will not extract words with full phrases. So they will learn like, what's that? As if it was one word.
That's true. Yeah.
And it's like that with a lot of European languages. You always have, because European languages are a bit similar in this aspect, that most of them have quite a fixed word order compared to what exists in the full variety of languages in the world. And so children will extract these larger units, and then they will have to learn how to break them down. But in languages which have a lot of conjugations, and very complex ones, then they will not have these long repeated sequences, because the verb would sound different in more contexts. So the units that they would extract, we hypothesize, would be smaller. So that is what I'm working on, basically, how the size of what children can extract correlates with the properties of languages.
Yeah, and I know that you study it based on children and how the language acquisition of children. But what I'm thinking about now, after hearing is comparing native language acquisition to secondary or tertiary language acquisition. And because it is native language acquisition is child language acquisition, most of the time you do learn language as a child. And I think that is very interesting too, because when we're learning another language, especially as an adult or just even as a teenager, if you start later on, you don't have that component of learning phrases, learning segments of the language. It's very much learning it from the structure. I mean, I think developing those learning those phrases, that is essentially fluency. Yeah. And then the other aspect of it is learning the structures, and you need both, but children have to learn the structures later on, whereas language learners who start later on have to learn the fluency aspect.
Yeah, so that's exactly that, actually. So the main difference between child language acquisition and adult acquisition is that adults, they know what words are, especially in countries with high levels of literacy. But in any way, academic
That's a good
research,
distinction. Yeah.
academic research on second language acquisition is almost only done on countries with high levels of literacy. So that's kind of a problem in itself. But
Yeah.
from the people that we study, and in any case in Western cultures or in the developed world where literacy levels are quite higher, people know what words are because when we write, usually words are separated with space. So we develop this knowledge of word, and we know that we have to combine them. So children, they start with bigger units, and then they have to learn how to break them down. As the adults, they do it the other way around. We start from the smallest units possible, and then we learn how to combine them. And actually, that's what, and with what you said with fluency is exactly correct, because it's much faster to retrieve something from memory rather than to combine something. Because when you just produce a phrase that you memorize like that, it's just one unit, it's just, you take it. Whereas if you combine two elements, you have to remember each element individually, and then you have to combine them. So the speed at which you're going to do it is going to decrease because it takes more cognitive processing. So,
yeah, I think that's true. And I'm thinking now because I spent a decent amount of time in like the elementary school grade, I guess, a teacher, studying, or at least studying how to teach in the elementary grades, and they do spend most of the time, like you said, with the larger pieces, and everything is structured more so that way. But there are pieces of the other component of like memorization, like vocabulary, like having a vocabulary list each week and having to memorize those, and they do have those, but they're not as effective in general. Like, when the kids, they get there. I don't know how our school system compares to the French school system either, so that could be a little different as well. But the majority of their school time is based on teaching them all of those concepts and those abilities that they don't pick up naturally. So it's almost like when we're teaching them these things that are somewhat unnatural, right? Like learning by the structures, and then the adult learners, well, we'll call them adult learners, even if they're a little bit younger. They are. It's almost like they're trying too much to learn something that's natural. And that's where like immersion, if you're even an adult and you go and you're in an immersive environment in the language, you pick things up more easily, of course, if you're doing the work while you're there. But it's as sort of like, as adults, we tend to overthink many things, understand everything, whereas kids, they're okay with not understanding everything. They don't know that there's more to understand yet.
Yeah, yes, definitely. Yeah, that's because children, they don't have what is called these meta-linguistic terms. So meta-linguistic, so all terms like used to describe language. So subjects, objects, verbs, direct objects, and nouns. These things, like, children, they don't need to learn these things to be able to start speaking. But then education and then learning those metalinguistic terms help them in the future to really have this additional knowledge and this additional mastery of their own language. But it's not something which is necessary. And this is not something that is like, I also think that for adult learners, it's something we spend too much time on. And like, it's not necessary to know what the accusative is to learn a language, for example. So yeah, I mean, children, they learn, definitely through immersion. I think what's really lacking now for language learners as adults is proper input sources, because that even like resources for learners, I find they are not as repetitive as the like language that children hear. Like when you study, like, because of my study, like I listen to recordings of like interactions between children and their mother. I listen to hours and hours of it every day. And it's so crazy how much children hear the same things over and over again.
That's true. And
And
don't touch
similar
that. Sit
structure.
down. Stop. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or just look at that. Oh, did you see that?
Hmm.
Yes. And basically, I think resources for language learners should match this one a bit more. So a bit more repetition. And but I guess learners would find it a bit boring. The problem also is that learners themselves, they want to understand the structure usually.
Yeah.
Like I know I know that there was some studies done on adult learners on a bit more immersive, and usually they get frustrated because
Mm.
learning through immersion is slower at first.
Yeah.
Because since you basically you have to infer the grammar rule from data, and data is like basically all the examples that you memorize or that you hear all the time. And it takes much more examples to infer the rules than if people just tell you the rule. But then
That's
if you
true.
infer the rule and it's based on all these examples, you're going to be able to use the rule a bit more fluently. So basically, what I think is efficient is to kind of get the rule, but still get a lot of input so that you can still start speaking quite early because you still get an idea of the structure. And then with the inputs in the future, you can really become fluent in it.
Yeah, I think I think you said it very well. And I think that there is this sense of for adults wanting to know everything and it can't all be known. It's just you just can't. And that it and at least over here, the way our language classes are structured within the high schools and the colleges and I'm sure that it's quite different because we don't have so much exposure to other languages over here. We're very cut off from that, so it's not a lot. And there is this pressure to to memorize everything, know all of these words, know all of this, know all of this, and not okay. How well can you communicate in this environment with this? And it's not practical, but it's easier to assess. So from the teacher perspective, it's like, okay, I can check these off, or even from the researcher, but I feel like that could even be improved too. It would just be multiple choice test. You would have to actually listen to people and assess them.
I think you really found the like you really said it well. It's because it would be harder to grade students, right? If you were not using this very
Yeah.
explicit meta-linguistic way of evaluating people. So there is this method of teaching which is called the task-based language teaching, which is actually against kind of this way of evaluating languages in general. And it's like, okay, languages is meant like it's a tool that you have to do things. And that's how native speakers use their language, right? They use speech to do things.
Yeah.
So because they want to suggest to do something or they want to ask someone to do something. And in this task-based language teaching, what they do is that each lesson is centered around one communicative act. So either to express a request, or how do you speak in the situation, and students are not evaluated in how correct their language use is, but rather can they complete the task, even if the language is not completely there, can the task be accomplished?
Okay.
And actually, the European framework of reference was originally based on such evaluation. If you read, the A1, A2, B1, B2, the self-evaluation systems, it's not saying, okay, you need to know how to use a subjunctive to be
Yeah.
B2. It's always, okay, can you read such types of texts for speaking? Okay, can you have conversations and things like that? So it's really based around what you can do. And of course, as such, it is more efficient in a way because students kind of like the types of processing is kind of different. You don't make a sentence just to make a sentence. You're trying to do something. And I think cognitively, these matter. Like these points matter.
Yeah. So with those type of tests, then if you are reading and then responding, is that response a written or like verbal response, or is it a like fill in the blank kind of response? Does someone have to actually grade it?
I don't really know how they actually evaluate such
Yeah, okay.
systems because it's rarely implemented. Like
Okay.
in Europe, they did all of this work on this system about how to create it, and then it's kind of okay, like it's all done. But I think it's so difficult to implement. Or teachers sometimes they believe that they are doing it, but they're still evaluating the correctness of the language. And
we have the same thing over here with the Common Core curriculum. It's the same idea. It's project based, it's task based, but it's not implemented well.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of a problem. And even in real life, if you learn a language for fun outside of school, like technically you want to be able to do things with the language, right?
It's true.
Even if it's to communicate with people, or you're living somewhere and you need to like be able to live your life, or if you just love to read books, like in any case, it never really matters if what you're saying is grammatically perfect or not. What matters is, was the communication working? Is it working? Can you do the thing?
That's true.
So
yeah, we're definitely lacking so much of that. And I can say from the academic side in the school systems, I can say that is a component that they are working on. And the linguistic side of that, from my perspective, is I've worked as a literacy specialist. I've worked as different things within language, but not so much research-based study, more with these, and more teacher-based. So I see from the teacher side that yes, that is it's the same issue is present over here, basically, with that and with language, and then across everything, everywhere where language is used, because you use language in every single subject. Every single subject, you have to do something with your language, even if it's math or science or anything. You have to be able to read and write and listen. So it's all over. But I think we should continue over on Instagram, because we are getting close to the end here. And thank you so much for joining me over here. And those of you who are not already on Morgan's Instagram, it is linguistically yours. Okay? And I will link it down below, and we will head on over there.
okay, thank you very, very much. Thanks.
You're welcome.